Hey everyone, I am Cory Lee, and I am talking today with a very special guest for this episode of Access All Areas. So today, joining me is Emily Rose Yates. She is a disability advocate, a public speaker, a world traveler, a journalist, and she always has the best hair of anyone that I know. So with that said, let's bring on Emily. Emily,
Hello.
hey, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me and for all the compliments.
You do have the best hair of anyone I know,
Thank
always. I
you.
mean, it's a different
Thank
color
you.
every time. I feel like I see you online, but amazing. You're an incredible person. So,
Thank you
really
so
happy
much.
to join us today. And we're definitely going to talk a lot about your travels. I know that you've been to a lot of really amazing destinations that we all can't wait to hear about. But to start us out, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what your disability is?
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Emily. I'm a wheelchair user with cerebral palsy, and I'm originally from a little town called Skipton in North Yorkshire in the UK, but I currently live in Glasgow, Scotland.
Awesome. I have not been to Scotland yet, but hopefully in the next couple of years, I'll finally get there.
We will welcome you with open arms when the time comes, for sure.
I can't wait. And, I know that you are a woman of many talents. You're a writer, a traveler, but you're also a big disability advocate, which is amazing. So, can you please, I guess, start us out with telling us about your advocacy work and maybe some of the issues that you're currently working on and how we can help?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess, got involved in numerous different types of disability advocacy over the last 20 years, really. I was born with cerebral palsy, I've been disabled all my life, and have learned really over the years to accept my disability, become proud of it, be proud of my disabled identity. And I guess advocacy becomes a part of that, really.
Yeah.
So I started fundraising at school for different disability charities. And then I started traveling and really getting involved with organizations that are interested in accessible travel. And then I guess the advocacy side of things really peaked when I got involved with an amazing organisation called Enhance the UK. They're a disability awareness charity, and they deliver disability awareness training to schools, organisations, businesses, anybody really who just wants to gain a little bit more comfort and confidence around disability. We don't deliver things like stats and what we call death by PowerPoint. It's very much really giving practical support and hints and tips around disability so people can feel, comfortable with going up to somebody, approaching them and having a conversation with them, which, let's face it, is what we all want to be happening.
Yeah.
But the other side of Enhance the UK's work is something called the Undressing Disability campaign, and that focuses on the sexual rights of disabled people, relationships, things like that. And that really, I got really invested and involved in that. And yeah, it's a wonderful organisation to be involved with.
Yeah, that all sounds incredible, and it definitely sounds like you're doing a lot to kind of lead the way in disability rights and advocacy, especially in the UK. So, thank you for all your work, first of all.
Oh no! Oh, thank you, thank you.
And I know that you have also written for Lonely Planet. You published an accessible guide to Rio de Janeiro for Lonely Planet before the Paralympic Games in 2016. And so, with the Paralympic Games in Tokyo just now wrapping up, what was that process like of actually living in Rio and researching the book? And just for me personally, I would love to know what that process is like to write an entire book for Lonely Planet.
Yeah, it was one of the most, the 2 years that I was in Rio was one of the most magical times of my life. It really was. It happened very suddenly. I had volunteered at the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games, and was mentioned by Lord Sebastian Coe in his closing ceremony speech as somebody that had done a lot of work around the Games, and was then invited by the British consulate to go over to Rio and to give a presentation about my life and my travels and my work there. And I was giving a presentation, and there was this one guy in the center of the room who I was kind of, I guess, focusing on. You know, when you give a bit of a speech and you always find somebody to focus on. So he was my person. And about halfway through the conversation, the presentation, he started looking at his phone, and I thought, oh no, I've lost him. And it turns out that he was actually texting his CEO, his manager, and he worked for the transport system in Rio de Janeiro called Metro Rio. And he stood up and he said, we need somebody that has the experience that you have to hopefully come and try and make the transport system more inclusive, more accessible. And we'd like you to interview for us tomorrow, which I did. And I got the job. And from that, that's where the Lonely Planet gig came from, because I'd lived in Rio and because I had experience of the city as a wheelchair user. I got in touch with Martin Heng, the brilliant Martin Heng at Lonely Planet, and said, have you thought about doing something around accessibility in the Paralympics? And from that came the guide, and it was full on, really busy, going into lots of different places, trying to get my friends who had a really good knowledge of Portuguese to come and help me and speak to all these museums and restaurant owners, and to just get a really good balance between tourist attractions, nightlife, great places of interest. I wanted disabled people to feel like they could do more than just go and visit Sugarloaf Mountain and call it a day. I really wanted them to get the real experience of Rio. So it was amazing. Thank you. Really great.
That sounds incredible. And Martin, I was able to meet up with him when I was in Melbourne, Australia, like
great
7 or 8 years ago. He's an amazing person. So really glad you got to work with him. And
yeah, I've definitely got a lot to thank him for.
Yeah, the Lonely Planet's published quite a few accessible guides in the past, like 10 years. And I mean, they are really great resources that a lot of people maybe don't know about. So if, you are needing information, definitely check those out, including the one Emily wrote all about accessible Rio de Janeiro. So that's another destination I've not been to, but when I go, I'm going to use your guide and plan out the entire trip.
Yeah, absolutely. You must. And it is the most full of life and vibrant place that I've ever been to. Wow. Absolutely in love with Rio.
And I know you've been to a lot of places, so that's saying a lot. And we all know that traveling as a wheelchair user, it comes with a lot of challenges, and at times I think that it can seem overwhelming to a lot of people. So, with that said, what inspires you to kind of just keep traveling and seeing as much as possible?
That's a really good question. And I think throughout the years that I've been traveling, I've realized that to me, there's two very distinct, different pockets of accessibility. You've got your physical access, so your ease of getting around the built environment. But you've also got something that I like to call social access, the kind of positive perception and mentality that surrounds disability. And quite often I find that the places that don't have great physical access often have brilliant social access, and vice versa. Yeah. So taking Rio as an example, I would be lying if I said that I didn't struggle with some of the physical access in the city. I absolutely did, especially when you move away from the main streets around Copacabana, for example. But I genuinely didn't have to wait more than about 2 seconds when crossing the road for somebody to just come and offer me a hand and not have any inhibition or awkwardness about it. Whereas in London, I would find physical access arguably quite a lot easier. But quite often there's this weird British awkwardness that we've all heard about and is very true, where we don't want to offend or patronise people, so we prefer to not do anything at all. And I think the interest in that and that dynamic is what really keeps me travelling. even when I have a difficult day with physical access, I can often have a great experience of social access, or vice versa. And I always find that really interesting.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you brought up, because I've definitely experienced the same. In some of the places that are the least accessible, I found like the friendliest people that are willing to lend a hand at any point. I mean, I remember being in India, and it's like somewhere that, you know, is not incredibly accessible in a lot of areas, but the people there are just so kind and willing to constantly help. And so, and then places, you know, where there was really good access, like in a lot of the US, there is that lack of social access, as you mentioned. So
Absolutely.
I fully agree with everything you just said. But I guess if you could only pick maybe one area to improve accessibility, what would that area be? Whether it's maybe it is social access, or maybe it's air travel, or something else.
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I think for me, it probably would be social access, because for me, I can have the most physically accessible experience in the whole wide world. But if I'm not treated with the respect and with the autonomy that I deserve, then quite often that physical access means very little to me. But that's probably coming from a bit of a place of privilege, that I can get out and transfer onto a plane seat, and it's not a massive deal for me. I'm a manual wheelchair user, so that's quite interesting how that answer would probably change for a lot of different people. What would be yours?
I would say, I mean, the social access I definitely agree with, but for me, I think to make travel easier would be more accessible airplanes, and just the whole air travel experience overall gives me like so much anxiety every time that I fly, that it's just like I can't enjoy it at all until I'm actually there in the destination. And just if I could somehow make that better and more accessible, it would really make the whole trip go smoother, I believe. But yeah, I think I mean, as you said, though, I think it depends on the disability. I mean, that's one thing that I try to constantly say is like the word accessible means something different to every disabled person.
Yes.
So, and accessibility does too. So, you know, it just depends on the person, I think.
Yeah, that's so true. I remember when I first started out writing about accessible travel, I remember kind of using the term fully accessible, and then learning as different people spoke to me, and as I got, I guess, a little bit more involved in what I was doing and a little bit more knowledgeable about it, that actually there's no such thing as fully accessible, because as you very rightly say, it means very different things to very different people. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to say hello to some people watching. Sherry says, hi, Cory and Emily.
Hi.
Sherry. Thanks for watching. Christopher's watching also. Hey, Christopher.
Hi, Sage. That's my partner in the other room watching.
Oh, it didn't hit me. Awesome. And Annette says, is there a sister group in the US, Emily? I think referring to the first point that you were making.
For Enhance the UK. Let me have a little think. I'm not 100% sure, you know. That's a really good question, and let me see if I can find something out. Annette, feel free to message me on Facebook, and I'll see if I can find an answer for you, if I can.
Awesome. Yeah. And Jan says, fantastic pair of disability role models. Hey, Jan. And we also have Janice watching. She says hello. So hello, Janice. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And if you are watching and have a question for Emily, then please leave a comment, and we will do our best to find you an answer. So back now, I want to really dive into some of the fun parts of traveling. We've talked about some of the challenges, some ways to maybe improve travel, but what are some of your favorite experiences that you've had while traveling? I guess if you could only name 2 or 3, what would be your top ones?
Oh, one story that always sticks out in my head. When I was working in Rio for the metro, I remember I'd had a particularly stressful day at work. I think we were on a time deadline or something like that, and we were doing a lot of risk assessments, and it was pretty down to the wire. And I remember just thinking, oh man, I wish I could just go home or see my friends or something like that. And I remember getting quite emotional after work, and this taxi driver came to pick me up to take me back to my hotel. And I got in the car, and he could see that I think I'd been visibly upset.
Yeah.
And the song Happy by Pharrell Williams had just come out. And he put this on with the CD player on the car, turned it up and sang in English and danced all the way back to my hotel for me, and just put the biggest smile on my face. And I think to me, that is the epitome of travel. You know, for me, you can have the most incredible experiences and see the most amazing landscapes and views and wonders of the world. But for me, it's all about people, and it's all about their experiences. And that really showed it to me. So that's one that always really sticks out. Let me think of some others. I guess one of the first times that I ever traveled on my own, I went to Singapore on my way to Australia. And met a few different people there that I'd been speaking to online, a few friends that I'd had at university, had relatives there, and they all met up with me, having never met me before, and showed me around Singapore. So again, I just felt really welcomed, really included, loved Singapore so much. So that's another really great memory. And probably number one is when I was 16, so in the summer of 2008, I went to Southern Africa, Namibia, Lesotho, and South Africa with a charity called the JOLT charity, the Journey of a Lifetime Trust. And every 2 years, the JOLT charity takes people with some kind of disability or disadvantage, as they put it, to far-flung and exotic locations. So, you know, you might have a physical impairment, but you might also have had quite a difficult emotional background growing up, for example. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to go on this trip and travel with 24 other young people from the ages of 14 to 21 who turned up on the trip as total strangers. We were from all over the UK. We didn't know each other at all. And we spent a month together, and still now, they are some of the best friends that I've ever had. We see each other on a regular basis, have reunions together, and we've just been total friends for life, if not family, through that beauty of travel.
Yeah, that sounds like an incredible experience.
It really was.
I wish I could be a part of it. We need that in the US.
Yes, can I come? Why don't we set something up?
Right, let's do it. I'm totally game whenever you are. I also know, you know, you're quite adventurous as well, and you've even crossed the Sinai Desert and were the first wheelchair user to do so, which sounds like an incredible feat that I cannot imagine doing. So what are some of the more adventurous experiences that you've enjoyed?
Oh, okay. That was definitely one of them. Not least because my mum had to join the trip as the female leader. Due to one of the other members of staff withdrawing at the last minute. So I'm sure you've had experiences like this before. We took a primary school chair with us and cut a hole in the bottom and made a commode out of it so I could go to the loo in the Sinai Desert. We slept under the stars, and I had the most incredible bonding experience with my mum. I was 18 years old when I went on that trip, and I'll be honest with you, when we first found out that the member of staff had withdrawn, I was kind of thinking, God, that's taking away my cool a little bit, my street cred a little bit, my mum coming with me. But it was one of the best things to ever happen. And it's a memory that we now share. And she's, you know, managed to travel to many of the places to visit me over the last few years. So we really share that bond and that love of travel. Crazy things that I've done. I've been cage diving with sharks off the coast of Cape Town. That was quite something. So putting on a wetsuit took an exasperating amount of time.
Yeah, I can
But
imagine.
but getting into the cage and seeing the sharks was incredible. And there was then quite a violent tap on my shoulder whilst I was in the water. And it turns out that my legs lost feeling whilst they were in the water, and one of them was dangling out the side of the cage. So
Oh my God.
I've still got both of them, very fortunately. But I think
Wow.
that kind of just shows you how delicate travel can be and how fragile it can be and how it needs to be respected as well. And I think when we quite often, as we were saying just before we went live, we're always focusing on the next thing and the next adventure, and examples like that just make you stop and think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely important to live in the present. I think when you're
Mm,
traveling, just to fully enjoy every moment. But also, it sounds like for safety as well, it's a good thing to kind of live in the present moment and be cautious as
definitely,
well. But yeah, cage
definitely.
diving with sharks, that's pretty amazing. And I've seen other people do that, and I just kind of like thought, I don't know about it. But now you got me like second guessing it. I'm thinking
Yeah,
like, if
do it.
I can do it, maybe I should do it.
Do it. What's your craziest?
Craziest one. I've had quite a few. I mean, I went to South Africa and went to meet a hippo and like tried to feed her a potato, and she jumped up out of the water and like grabbed the side of my wheelchair with her teeth and started pulling me into the water. And so, I mean, like I was almost eaten by a hippo
The
in South
epitome
Africa.
of a hungry hippo.
Yeah, exactly. And I went hot air ballooning, and we hit a tree coming down one time. So
Oh
that was a
no.
bit of a bumpy and a rocky ride, but we made it. It was totally fine, but a little scary there for a moment.
Yeah, that's something I've not done and I would love to do. I would
You got
love to like see the sunrise from a hot air balloon or something like that.
I've done it in Las Vegas, which I know you're a big fan of.
Yeah.
And I've done it also in Catalonia, Spain, and
Wow.
Israel. So there are quite a few options out there.
Amazing. I will definitely be hitting you up for those details.
Okay, I'll look forward to it. And we do have a question. Janice wants to know, what is your favorite European destination?
Oh, good question, Janice. I think it differs depending on what I'm looking for at that particular moment. I think accessibility wise, Barcelona is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
It's got a bit of everything for a city. You know, it's very, very rare that you have a city that has a beach and all of those different things, and so much history and culture, wonderful food, all of that. So Barcelona would be very, very high on my list. It's probably a little bit of a cop out, but I do also have to say that I'm really, really fond of London when I visit, just because I studied there. I've got a lot of friends there, and it always feels a little bit like home. But can London even count as a European destination anymore? I mean,
I
let's
think,
not
I
get
think
into that, but that's horrific.
yeah, I think it can count though. We'll count it for the purposes of this.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And also, Annette says, "What a wonderful story."
Thank you, Annette.
And my mom is watching and says she thinks you're awesome, and she agrees. Your hair always looks amazing.
Oh, thank you, Sandy. Thank you.
Trying to see if there are any other comments. Janice says, "So glad you said Barcelona. Love it. Have you been to Berlin?"
I have been to Berlin and absolutely loved it too. I would love to go back. I've only been once, and didn't feel like I got the time to really soak everything up. There is so much to see and so much to do. It's very true what they say about Berlin. It's not the prettiest city in the world, but if you want to go just to really learn and almost come out of the trip a bit of a better person, for lack of a better term, I really don't think there's anywhere else that could top Berlin.
Nice. That's good to hear. And we have one more question. From your experience, which airline is the most accommodating for wheelchair users?
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh, depends where you're going. I had the most amazing experience flying home from LA with Air New Zealand.
Oh, nice.
It was incredible. I was so well looked after. That was about, I'm trying to think, probably nearly 10 years ago now. Where else? What else do I really like? I have to say that I've always had good experiences with British Airways, and I know that this isn't true for a lot of people, but I've always had quite a good experience. And I do also have to say that I am quite a fan of getting the cheapest flights that I possibly can. So I've had many an experience on Ryanair, Jet2, EasyJet, etc.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm a fan of
You
cheap
get what you pay
ones
for.
also. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Got to be careful. But I've always said, I mean, I don't think there's any airline that is just like the safe bet for wheelchair
No.
users. They're all, in my experience anyway, pretty equal. I mean, I've had really amazing experiences with Delta, with Southwest, with JetBlue, United, but then I've also had really terrible
Yeah.
experiences with all of those airlines. So I think it kind of just depends on that flight that you're taking that day and what the crew is like on that flight
I'd
specifically.
agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
A bit of a hit and miss sometimes. And we talked a lot about your adventurous experiences, your favorite experiences, but are there any travel experiences that maybe stand out as not so great? And how did you deal with that to overcome? And hopefully, you still had an amazing trip.
Yeah, there's one in particular that always stands out. I have to say, I feel like I've been quite fortunate where I've not had too many bad travel experiences. But I was once traveling to Dubai with my sister to visit a friend that I'd met in Australia. We were at university together, and we were so excited for this trip. It was just before Christmas. And I was taking my sister with me, who'd never met my friend before, and got on the plane. Of course, it's quite a long flight. I think from the top of my head, I think it's about 8 hours from the UK to Dubai,
Yeah.
and about halfway through the flight, I'm sure you're probably the same. I dehydrate myself as much as possible before a flight, but about halfway through the flight, I was like, "Go right, okay, I need to go to the loo." And called the bell. A member of staff came and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, we don't have an in-flight wheelchair on the plane."
Oh my gosh.
I was like, "Oh, okay, all right then." So I had to crawl the length of the plane,
No
with
way.
I mean, I didn't have another choice.
Oh, yeah.
With a lot of people staring, a lot of kind of whispering, and I just felt I'm quite a confident person, as you can probably tell, but I felt really vulnerable and really
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And then we landed in Dubai, and another member of the crew came with an in-flight wheelchair to
Oh,
get me off the plane. So they
wow.
did have one,
Oh my
but there was
goodness.
just a lack of training, communication, whatever it was. So that one really does stand out for me,
Well,
for
yeah,
sure.
that should definitely stand out. That sounds pretty, I guess, humiliating. And I mean,
Mm,
I kind of look at everything from like I'm teaching like able-bodied people, like showing them, what it's like to have a disability. If I'm getting on a plane and they happen to see it or something like that. But that would
mm,
really drive me up the wall if that happened to me. So,
yeah, for
that
sure, for sure.
sounds.
We still had a great time though. It
Yeah,
was
still had
fun.
a good trip. It's all worth it in the end.
Yeah, definitely.
What is your top tip for other travelers that use a wheelchair? Like before they go on a trip, what is one thing they should keep in mind?
Um, I think probably two things that I would say. Never ever be afraid to check and check again. I say this about hotel stays, making sure that your assistance is booked with your airline, whatever it might be. Never be afraid to check and check again, because I have had so many conversations over the phone, over email, whatever it may be, where I've been assured that something is accessible and will cater to my requirements, and I've arrived and that's not been the case. So I think just having that confidence to really ask questions, even though we shouldn't necessarily have to, I think it's a good thing to get into the habit of doing. And also, I think what you said is a really good point. Just remember that if anything does go wrong, it's an education process for the people that you're with, but also to enrich you and your experiences as well. Some of the negative experiences that I've had through my life have been the most affecting in making me the person that I am. And I think that's when you can turn a negative into a strength wherever possible. That's a real beautiful resource that we have as disabled people that other people don't necessarily have the gift of. And I think we should use that wherever we possibly can.
Yeah, exactly. I love that tip. I think that's very important to constantly remember when we're traveling, because I think, something is always going to go wrong on any trip, as a wheelchair user especially, but you got to just have a positive mindset, look at it as a teaching moment and get through it. So yeah, very good points that you made. And my last question for you, once this pandemic is finally over, if it ever gets there, what is on the top of your travel bucket list?
Oh, well, next week I was supposed to be going to Vegas for my 30th and to do a bit of a wedding recce with CJ, my fiance. So, probably that's now pushed its way quite up high the travel list, so we can make the most of that and maybe have a 30 and a half celebration or something like that. In terms of places that I've always really wanted to go, I would have to say that Japan is number one. I have never been to Japan. I would love to go to Tokyo and other areas. And yeah, that's definitely up there as a real dream destination, as a real bucket list item.
Yeah, Japan is number one on my list as well. So yeah, let's plan it.
For sure. Let's do one of those group trips out there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm totally ready.
Great.
Alrighty. And is there anything else that you'd like to say? And how can people find you and connect with you online?
Yeah. So thank you for everybody that's watched and listened. You can find me online. So I'm Emily Rose Yates on Facebook. I'm M.I. Yates on Instagram and Emily I. Yates on Twitter. And I've also got a website, emilyroseyates.co.uk, if you would like to chat or collaborate or anything like that.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking with us today, Emily. It's been a lot of fun hearing about your travel experiences and your tips. So yeah, could not have gone better. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me and asking me. It's a real pleasure.
All right. Yeah, we'll stay in touch. Thank you. And thank you all so much for watching today. This has been a really fun interview. I hope you've learned a thing or two about traveling as a wheelchair user and what Emily's perspective is like. So we'll be back in a couple weeks with a brand new episode of Access All Areas. But until then, stay safe and see you later. Bye.